Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony, Mr. Pomper. I'm going to lead off into questions. We'll each take 5 minutes and do as many rounds as we can accommodate. And so it seems to me that your testimony ended on a note very important. Real consideration about addressing this issue has to start at this side of the table in terms of our role as defined by the Constitution in light of the new threats to national security and the new tools of war. I can tell you that the vote for AUMF 20 years ago never envisioned that I would be considering the use of drones and innocent civilian casualties in Yemen. That was not part of our calculation when we responded to 9/11. And so we have to take on the responsibility of accepting our constitutional mandate and implementing it in light of changed circumstances in a dramatic way. Secondly, I believe it's naive to think that terrorism has an expiration date or that terrorists are looking forward to a peace negotiation. I don't think that is the nature of the threat, and we have to accommodate that as well. We think in terms of classic war, and this is far from classic. The third question, obviously, is what we're going to do by way of oversight on the executive branch. Mr. Pomper, could you tell me, by your definition, how many countries the United States is now using drones in to fight terrorism? Lethal drones.
So thank you very much for the question, Senator. I think you've put your finger on a really important point by asking that question. The answer is I honestly can't tell you with any level of confidence how many countries. The executive branch did, I believe, last report on the groups that it is fighting in a report that the Obama administration issued at the end of 2016. I believe that subsequent reports, including reports that have been mandated to this body by the NDAA, have included some key details in classified annexes that are not available to the public. So decisions about which groups the U.S. is fighting under the AUMF, where it's fighting them, are taken in the first instance within the executive branch. They may be reported to Congress through committee channels or through reports that can include classified annexes, but they are not necessarily available to the public. And the result is that it can come as a surprise to find out that the United States is using drones or it's using ground troops or other means of projecting force in parts of the world that people aren't aware that the United States is at war in.
But think about what that says. We're supposed to declare war on behalf of the American people and ask them to give up their children and loved ones to serve our nation in a noble cause. And yet, at this moment in time, the average routine of members of Congress does not include a disclosure of how many countries we are currently at war with. And I would suggest that if we are using drones in a lethal capacity to hunt terrorism, let alone to kill innocent individuals, that should be at least disclosed to the American people. And it's just amazing to me that it is not. And I think it really betrays the wisdom of this policy and the legality of it. So let me go to one example I used earlier, and that is the situation in Yemen. If Ms. Al-Matakwal is properly summarized, she believes there have been 64 innocent civilians killed and 20 wounded by the United States in the use of drones in Yemen. So I'd like to ask Ambassador Sales and General Jumper to react to that, establishing that as a premise, but also to react to a quote from General Stanley McChrystal about the use of drones. This is what he said. "What scared me about drone strikes," General McChrystal said, "is how they are perceived around the world. The resentment created by American use of unmanned strikes is much greater than the average American appreciates. They are hated on a visceral level, even by people who've never seen one or seen the effects of one." I raise that point because Ambassador Sales said that these are precision weapons. It's hard to argue they are precision weapons if 64 innocent people were killed in a country where most Americans would not list as one of our combatants in war. So would you like to react to General McChrystal's statement, General Jumper, or Ambassador Sales, please?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take a stab at that. I think drone strikes are precise compared to the alternatives. Consider fixed-wing aircraft, consider conventional ground forces going into an objective to use lethal force. To say that drone strikes are more precise than the alternative is not to say that they don't make mistakes. Sometimes they do. Sometimes intelligence is incomplete. Sometimes terrorists are hiding among civilians that operators were not aware of. Of course, drones are a tool that can be used in a more precise or less precise way. The key point, however, I think, is that when compared to the alternatives, drones do a much better job of allowing the United States to comply with our obligations under the law of armed conflict, to respect the proportionality principle, and also to put into practice some of the policy standards that are offering even more protection to civilians than the baseline requirements of the law of armed conflict.
I don't think there's much precision in the stories that we've heard about use of lethal drones killing people at a wedding, a funeral. I mean, you really describe it in a fashion that is belied by these realities that we've seen in countries around the world. Senator Grassley.